Now, feeling stressed during pregnancy is very common, but too much stress may predispose someone into unnecessary headaches and also loss of appetite. Now, too much stress once again can also lead to some health complications, which could include high blood pressure, but most importantly, it may lead to one having a child that is premature. On our show today, we want to talk about stress and pregnancy. We do have a counseling psychologist who is helping us with the discussion. We will be having a look at some of the types of stress there are during pregnancy and how to cope with them. You may want to be part of the show by maybe asking us a few questions or even sharing with us your experience with stress during pregnancy. Then feel free, you can use the number that will be displayed right at the bottom of your screen to call us live, or use the hashtag #MyDoctor on Twitter at Ebru TV Kenya, at Purity_Museo, or even talk to us via our Facebook page, which is Ebru TV Kenya and Purity Museo. For now, I'll ask you to sit back, relax, and learn from this exciting show ahead. You're watching My Doctor Show, and my name is Purity Museo. Our topic of discussion today is stress and pregnancy. Use the number 0791 478 990 to call us live and ask us a few questions. You can also use the hashtag #MyDoctor on Twitter at Ebru TV Kenya, at Purity_Museo to ask us questions. And also, if you have an experience, you can just also share with us. In studio, do help me welcome Dr. Ruth Mwaura, who is a counseling psychologist, to just help us discuss stress and pregnancy. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mwaura.
Thank you.
We do appreciate that you could brace us with your presence today. Our topic of discussion is stress and pregnancy. I know these are two different topics, stress and pregnancy, but I do understand there's so much. It's very common when you're pregnant or when someone is pregnant to just have some form of stress. Let's get by defining what stress is before I could get to now what type of stress could affect one during pregnancy.
Okay, so definition of stress, it's how our bodies react to the physical, emotional, and psychological demands, the demands that we have every day. So sometimes that's the way our body reacts to the demands of life, the pressures of life. Yes.
How our body reacts to the pressures of life.
Yeah.
So is it affected by the way we react? When, for example, we react negatively, is it when now we get to have stress in our lives?
Yeah, so you get most of the time, people react differently to stress. There's somebody you get that a certain kind of stress will be negative to you, and somebody else it will be normal. So how we react to stress also matters, and it's also a contributing factor to how we function. Yes.
And we have different types or forms of stressors for life.
So you find there's positive stress.
Really?
Yes. So you find that most of the time when we hear the word stress, most of the time we think it is the distress, the negative stress. But you find there's positive stress. Like, for example, you're working at a place and your boss now needs a report. So your body, because of that report that you need to do, will wake up, and you know it will now get to now do the job. So sometimes find that there's a positive stress which helps somebody to get into action and do something.
And is there a harmful effect for the positive stress?
So you find that most of the time the positive stress helps you, because sometimes if it's not there, most of the time you get to find that you are not doing much. So sometimes the positive stress helps you to do something that maybe you've been delaying to do. So if there's a deadline to do, sometimes it is positive and it wakes your mind to do the action that needs to be done. But there's also now the negative stress, which we call the distress, which affects how our bodies react. So you find that when the negative stress comes into play, our bodies now are affected in terms of our physical, our emotional, and our psychological well-being. Yes.
We have positive stress and
Yes,
negative.
and
I
negative
didn't know
stress,
about the
yeah.
positive stress.
Yeah.
Or it's what it's popularly known as adrenaline. You know, you just up to just do the task because of the deadline that you are having. That's a positive stress.
Yes.
Right, let's talk about the negative stress, the distress.
Yeah.
What are some of the common types of distress that we have?
Okay, so you find most of the time stress is different. Every individual reacts to stress in a different way. But you find most of the time it's because of the our day-to-day activities, the things that we need to do. Even the waking up, the activities that you need to do in a day sometimes causes stress. But depending on a person, everybody reacts differently to stress. So sometimes you find there's no clear definition of the types of stress. It depends with how it is affecting the individual. Yes.
But there are signs and symptoms for a negative stress or distress, right?
Yeah, so most of the time you find that when it comes to the negative stress, you will be able to know that this is a negative stress because of how your body is reacting. The positive stress, you'll be able to deal with it and cope. But the negative stress, you find that most of the time, either you are getting headaches, that sometimes you go to a doctor and all tests are done and there's nothing, they can't find anything. Sometimes you have find that you have stomach aches, digestive problems, that as much as you go to the doctor, no test can say what you're suffering from. Sometimes you find that you're irritable. Something small makes you very irritable. Sometimes you find that you have anger outbursts, which is uncommon of you. Maybe sometimes later you find that maybe previously, this kind of situation that you are in, you will be able to cope. But at this particular time, it just makes you angry. You find you're irritable. You find that you are not able to relate with others well. So sometimes you find these are signs and symptoms of stress, which is the negative stress, the distress. So it means at that particular time, your body is not functioning well. The physical, the emotional, it's not coping. So you find that you're able to know that there are negative things in your life because of how you are reacting to situations in your life.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you've mentioned that the way stress can affect you, sometimes you end up having some headaches, but there are also some long-term complications for stress. So maybe you could take us through the stages for stress, how it affects someone slowly by slowly, and you end up getting these long-term complications.
Yeah. So you find that most of the time, the usual stress that we're able to cope, because find at any particular time in our lives, you can't say we can't be stressed. We are always under pressure. We are always having stresses here and there. But as human beings, we are resilient. So you find that most of the time we're able to cope with this day-to-day activities, day-to-day stresses, we're able to cope. But most of the time you find that now when it goes to the next level, we are not coping. So sometimes you find this person is not sleeping well, this person is not feeding well, this person is having activities which are not okay. You find that they are not doing what they're supposed to do. They no longer enjoy the things that they used to enjoy. So you find that most of the time, these stresses, they can lead to high blood pressure. So you find that most of the time, you find that a person who has high blood pressure, they're asked by the doctor, what is happening in your life? Are you having a lot of stress? Are there things that are happening in your life that you're not able to cope with? So you find that stress, too much stress, the negative stress, which we call distress, leads to high blood pressure. Also heart problems, because now when you have too much stress, what happens is that if there's something that you're supposed to do, for example, you have a deadline, that's just an example, what happens is that your body now conserves the energy that is supposed to do other biological mechanisms in the body to deal with what it's now at hand. It needs to do something so that you can be able to cope. So you find that when there's accumulated stress which is too much, the body is not functioning. The mechanisms, the biological processes that the body is supposed to do, it's not doing it. So you find that now this brings about other physical complications, like we've said, high blood pressure, heart problems, because now the body's physiological processes are not being done well. Yes.
And you're saying that the high level stress may lead to high blood pressure, heart disease, and other complications. So the high level stress, is it depression, or what's the difference between the two? Because also we see depression has the same long-term effect. So the high level stress, is it the same way as saying that this person is depressed when it gets to high level, or is it still a stress? What's the cut line?
So you find there's a thin line between now the high stresses, where you find out when somebody is too much stressed, they are not able to cope. So if this happens for a period of time, like remember we said depression, it has to have occurred within 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, more than 2 weeks. So every day of your life, you're feeling sad. Every day of your life, you're not able to do the things you used to do. Every day of your life, your moods are low for more than 2 weeks. So stress, you find that most of the time when it comes to stress, most individuals are able to cope. But now within that 2 weeks before it reaches the threshold for depression, there's too much stress. So this person is not coping. So you find that most of the time these stresses now lead to depression. So there's always a connection between too much stress and depression. Yes.
And let's talk about now stress and pregnancy for pregnant women. What are the common causes for stress during pregnancy?
So sometimes you find that individuals are different. Pregnant mothers are different. So one stressor to one woman will be different to the other person. How this woman reacts to this stressor is also different from the other woman. So you find that most of the time, you find that stress comes to women, especially the pregnant women, because of maybe the demands. Maybe it's a first-time mother. They are worried about how will the pregnancy go on, will the birth be normal, will there be complications. So sometimes you find this person, because they have not had an experience of pregnancy, sometimes they are stressed. Also you find that some mothers, they lack the social support, because we said that social support is very, very important, especially for a pregnant woman. But most of the time you find that this woman doesn't have support, maybe support from the partner. So this also predisposes this pregnant woman into stress. Then sometimes you find that there are too much demands. This is a woman who is first, is a mother, is an employee somewhere. Also this woman is also a spouse. So you find that there are a lot of demands to this woman. And sometimes maybe this woman is not even able to handle all these demands. So sometimes this predisposes the woman into stress. Yes.
And doc, sometimes it's not easy to tell when a pregnant woman is stressed because there are so many changes that come, mood swings.
Yes.
So how are you able to identify this is not just the normal hormonal changes, there is stress with this person?
So you find that most of the time, you find that this person is able to cope. So anytime a person is not coping, that's when now we know this is not normal. Because most of the time you find that a pregnant woman, they have a lot of hormonal changes. And sometimes these hormonal changes bring about mood changes. So sometimes you always find a woman, most of the people say, this one always snaps, they are always angry. But you find that it is because of the hormonal changes that are occurring in this woman. Then you find that there's a lot of mood changes, because when there's always an hormonal imbalance, meaning this person now has a lot of mood changes. But over time, they're able to cope with it. But if a person is not coping, then we know now at that particular time now this person is under stress. But you can always, the woman can always know their changes, because sometimes you find that they are not able to cope. Maybe before they were coping, stresses that they had before, they are the same, but at this particular time, they are not coping. Sometimes they feel so fatigued, tired. In the morning, you wake up, it's not because of the pregnancy, no, but you're feeling tired. So this sometimes shows that you are not coping well. You may be under stress. Yes.
And do we have some typical signs and symptoms that you are able to single out a woman who is stressed during pregnancy?
So you find the irritability. Most people say that a pregnant woman will be irritable, but you find that this irritability continues, it goes on. They are triggered by very minute things. Something small just takes them off. Then you find that most of the time they're not able to do the activities they used to. It's not because of the pregnancy, but it is because of the stress. So you find also the relationship that they have maybe with the partner, with co-workers, with friends, with family, also there's a change. So most of the family members, the spouse, are able to recognize there's a change. There's something that is happening with this person. And sometimes you find this person is not able to sleep well. Also, they are always complaining about headaches. They take medication, but the headache is not going away. Also, their sleep patterns, they are not able to sleep well. Sometimes they are sleeping too much. Sometimes they are sleeping too little. And you find that sometimes also they are not able to cope with the day-to-day challenges. So this sometimes you find these are signs and symptoms of stress. Yes.
And also help us differentiate between the signs and symptoms for stress, and also because we do have signs and symptoms for the first trimester. They're really almost the same as the ones for stress. So how are you able to differentiate the two?
Yeah, I think now the duration and also the coping. Because because of the different hormonal changes that the woman is experiencing, sometimes you find there's irritability, but this irritability sometimes just goes, as the woman is adjusting to the pregnancy, it goes away. But you find that now because of accumulated stress, you find that most of the time this person is always irritable. Things that won't set off them off initially now sets them off you find they are not able to cope, because I think the most important thing is, are you coping or not? So if you are not coping, it means you are under stress. But most of the time you find that we're able to cope. Every day challenges we cope, but if you are not coping at all, then that is a sign of stress. Yes.
So what should the ideal pregnancy, you know, stress-free pregnancy be like? What's your advice? And also, how is it like? What do we expect?
We can't say there's an ideal. Most women will want to have a stress-free pregnancy, but you cannot always predict the future. You can't predict the life events, the life changes here and there. But I think most important thing is for the woman to be self-aware. Are there things that you are noticing that were not there before? Are they because of the pregnancy, or it's because of the challenges that you're having? So sometimes you find there's a lot of challenges, you are not able to cope. So it's for the woman to be very self-aware, so that you can always know that this one is not pregnancy. You know, like you can also ask the doctor, the pediatricians, ask, Daktari, this is what I'm experiencing. Is it common? Is it normal for a pregnant woman? Now this one is something that is different. So I think for the woman, it's for them to be self-aware, so that they can know when there are changes in behavior, there are changes in how they are reacting to things. Yes.
Let's get to the long-term complications for stress during pregnancy. How can it affect the mother and also the unborn child?
So you find when it comes to the mother, especially now the high blood pressure, because you find that most of the time, because this person is constantly being under stressed, you find that it can lead to high blood pressure. Also the heart diseases when it comes to the mother. Because first understand that during pregnancy, this woman has a lot of things that are happening, a lot of physiological reactions, a lot of hormonal changes occurring in the body. So as much as they are feeding, and they have to do it mostly for themselves and also for the baby. So this now puts the woman at much pressure than an ordinary woman, because now they are doing it for themselves and also for the baby. So you find most of the time this woman is predisposed to high blood pressure and also heart diseases. Yes,
those two,
the most common.
So when you talk about predisposing a pregnant woman, this is a very special woman at this particular point, high blood pressure and heart diseases. What does it mean for a pregnant woman to have high blood pressure and even a heart problem?
You find that for a woman who has high blood pressure, it affects the baby, because when you have uncontrolled high blood pressure, the effects to the baby is that this woman can have a premature baby. Also, it raises the risk of this woman having a miscarriage. That's why you find that most of the time a pregnant woman has to always undergo checkups, so that they can monitor the blood pressure. If it is high, they have to be monitored very, very, very slowly, so that the risk to the baby can be minimized. Yes.
So is it the same way that you were explaining how it affects the baby as well? Do we have a different way in which stress for a pregnant woman can affect the baby directly?
So you find that studies have shown that stress, especially the high levels of stress, to a baby, it can predispose this baby to having low birth weight. So you find that a baby is born, yes, but they have low birth weight. Also, there's a risk of a baby being born prematurely. So this means that before 37 weeks, this baby is born. And you find that most of the time for this child, high levels of stress can also lead to some congenital malformations. So you find that especially during the first trimester, when a lot of things are being, the baby is undergoing a lot of changes, the digestive system is being formed, the brain is also being formed. So high levels of stress can lead to this baby having complications later on in life, especially when it comes to neurodevelopmental disorders. These are autism, ADHD. A child whose mother, who's now the pregnant woman, had a lot of stress during pregnancy, this child can be predisposed into neurodevelopmental disorders. So you find that during the early childhood, when now the child between 1 year and 2 years, you find that this child has a lot of a lot of complications. So you find that this child is not developing well compared to other children. You find that maybe this child has developmental delays where they're not talking at the time they're supposed to talk. They're not walking at the time they're supposed to walk. So most of the time you find that this will be seen. So high levels, maybe at that particular time when the mother is pregnant, you won't see it. But once the child is born, you find that there are a lot of delays that come about.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we have a relationship between stress and some of the birth defects that we see children being born with.
Studies have shown there is.
Yeah.
But this also is different depending on different mothers. But you find that there's a higher risk of a child having developmental delays because of high levels of stress during pregnancy. So you find that sometimes because of like the first trimester, the child is now developing, the brain is developing. So you find that this child can be born having cognitive delays or cognitive issues. So you find this child, yes, is born, they are normal, but as they grow, you find that there are issues. You find that there are developmental delays. There are things you can point out that you find that they are not normal according to these other children. That's why you find that most of the time between 1 year to 3 years, when you take the doctor to, when you take the child to the doctor, they will ask you, how was your pregnancy? Did you have stress? How was the stress? Did you have support? So they want to know, were there high levels of stress during pregnancy, which can be a factor for these developmental delays in the child.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what are some of the risk factors for stress for pregnant women? What, as pregnant women, should they be looking out for? What are the risk factors really?
So you find that lack of support, it's something that has been shown to have a risk. So you find that this pregnant woman, there's a lot of changes happening to them. And you find that if they lack that support, especially from their partners, because you find that sometimes this pregnant woman doesn't have support from the partner. So they have a lot of burdens, they have a lot of stresses that they're undergoing, and sometimes they're not able to cope. So when they don't have the support from their partners or even the family, sometimes this is a risk factor to them.
Yeah.
You also find mothers that are women that are not able to cope with the day-to-day challenge, because you find that most people sometimes when you're pregnant, they don't take a break, you know, so you want to do too much, but you forget that you also have to take care of yourself and also the baby. So sometimes for the mother, it's good to delegate. So when you find that you're having a lot of things that you cannot be able to cope with, it's okay for you to delegate. So sometimes find that these are some of the risk factors for the mother. Yes.
And you've talked about support system, lack of good or enough support system.
Yeah.
But we do have single parents. You don't have a husband, but at the same time you are pregnant. So who is at a risk of getting stressed during pregnancy? Are these in the category of people who are at a risk of getting stressed during pregnancy?
So when you find it depends. Because you can find someone is a single mother, but they're able to cope because of maybe the personality. These are people that are resilient and they're able to cope with the stresses. But they say single women are at a higher risk compared to women that have support from their partner. But also this is different because you can say that a single mother may be stressed, but you find that the one that is not single is more stressed than the single mother. But you find that most of the time, maybe this woman can be single, yes, but they have support systems outside there. So they have friends that are there for them. They have a family that is there for them. So as much as they are not getting support from their partner, but they are getting support from the family members. But you find that most of the time, this other woman who has a partner, or maybe is married and has a partner, sometimes maybe they're not getting support from their partner, or they're maybe not getting support from their family members or friends. So you find that most of the time you can't say per se that a single woman will be affected more than this other person, but there's a higher risk for this single woman if they're not getting support.
Yeah.
But if they're getting social support, then you find that they're able to cope. Yes.
And we take a break now, but when we come back, we'll be having a look at some of the treatment options for stress during pregnancy, and also how to manage someone or how to cope with pregnancy or stress during pregnancy. Do stay tuned. Watching My Doctor Show, and our topic of discussion is stress and pregnancy. In studio, we do have Dr. Ruth Maura, a counseling psychologist who is helping us with the discussion. Welcome back, Doc, to the second part of the show.
Okay.
Yes, and we already talked about how stress can mean to a pregnant woman. But now let's get to how it can affect a child in life later. What happens when, for example, a mother has been diagnosed with stress, she's been through stress all through her pregnancy, and then now the child has been born. How does it affect her or his life later on in life?
Most of the time you find that for a child, this is especially now once the child is now being is born after birth. A few years after birth, maybe say a year or two, you find that some children, not all, you find that they have delays, which we call developmental delays. So this child is not developing at par with other children. So you find that at the age that they're supposed maybe to be talking, they are not. At the age they're supposed to be walking, they are not. So you find that there are delays that the mother can be able to look out for. So you find that this child, because of the high levels of stress during pregnancy, this child is predisposed. But not all children. You find that there are children where the mother was had high levels of stress, but they are okay. But you find that this is a risk factor for the child. And also you find that sometimes this child can also have behavioral problems, adjustments. So you find that a child whose mother had high levels of stress, at this particular time you find that this child is very fearful. So not the kind of fear that you find most children are fearful, especially when they have strangers. But you find that this child is always very fearful. So sometimes you find that their behaviors are also affected depending on how the mother was during pregnancy.
During pregnancy.
Yes.
And you mentioned that it increases chances of a baby being born prematurely. So what does it mean, just to help our viewers understand what it means by having a baby that has been born prematurely? What are some of the complications that may come with the premature delivery?
So you find that most of the time when the mother is stressed, high levels of stress again, you find that there's a chemical that is being released. There's a chemical called cortisol. So high levels of cortisol affects the baby. And that's why you find now it predisposes the child to be born prematurely. So you find that a child that is born prematurely, sometimes you find that maybe all, most of the developmental things have not occurred. So you find that a child who is maybe born below 37 weeks, because they say from 37 weeks to 40 weeks, this is a fully developed child. So at 37 they can be born, but a child who is born below 37 weeks, they are not fully developed. So you find that at every given trimester there are different things that are happening to this child. So you find that sometimes this child, when they are born prematurely, it means that they have not developed fully. So sometimes they have to be kept in an incubator where they have to be monitored. So you find that the risk for a child who is being born prematurely is that they can have heart problems. So those are some of the things that you find the child can have because of being born prematurely. Yes.
And Doc, now let's get to, because you've mentioned some of the health hazards that come with stress during pregnancy. So how do you diagnose stress during pregnancy?
So sometimes, most of the time you find that when it comes to stress, it is self-diagnosis. Most of the time it is the mother who now feels that there's something that is not okay. How I am behaving, how I am reacting to things, it's not the way I used to react. But you find that most of the time the mother may not be aware. So it is good when you have changes, and especially if the family members, the partner, you notice there are changes in this woman, it's good to highlight. It's good to talk. It's good to ask the woman what is happening. Are you okay? Are there issues that are happening in your life? Are you undergoing stresses? And especially now for the mother who is now aware that there are changes, there are things, how I used to react to situations in life, how I used to react to people there are changes. So it's good for them to seek advice from their doctors. When they go maybe for appointments, they're able to ask the doctor, there are things that I've noticed about myself. What could be happening? But there are mothers who are self-aware and they know this is not normal. These are signs and symptoms of stress. So they're able to take action.
Yeah,
Yes.
and because, doctor, you're saying it's a self-awareness, it should be a self-awareness journey. So do we have treatment for stress during pregnancy?
Yeah, so you find that most of the time when it comes to stress, it hasn't reached the threshold for depression. So most of the time you find that most of the treatment plans for this mother is not medication, because at that particular time they're not depressed. But if these stresses continue for a longer period of time, the mother can be predisposed to depression.
Right.
So you find that most of the time it's not medication, because most of the time when the mother is pregnant, the doctor is always careful not to medicate. So most of the time it's other things apart from medication. So you find that at this particular time, the mother will be asked maybe to do more exercise, you know, just few workouts here and there, because you find exercise is good, not even for the mother, but for any other person. Because what happens when you exercise, there's a chemical that is being released called endorphins. Endorphins are the happy, feel-good hormones. So when a person is exercising, those chemicals are released. And when these chemicals are released, they also affect your mood. So your moods now kind of change. If the mood was low, slowly it gets to be uplifted. So also other things that for the woman who is pregnant is for them to delegate, because sometimes you find this woman has too much. This it might be their first pregnancy or not. So if they have other children, you find that this mother first is a mother to other children, is also a spouse, is also an employee. So sometimes you find there are so many demands to this woman, sometimes it is too much for them. So it's good for them to delegate. House chores they can delegate. Maybe going to the shops for shopping and what have you, they can also delegate. So it's good for this woman to do what they can do. And if it is too much, then they're able to let other people help them.
Yeah,
yes.
And now we're getting to the management for stress during pregnancy. But just before that, Doc, you could help us, because most women will not be able to differentiate between stress and just the normal hormonal changes during pregnancy. What would you tell of the knowledge? What is the knowledge for stress and pregnancy for women, let's just say in the country right now, because I know you'll be telling us counseling for pregnancy to just avoid all these issues, but what would you rate us as a country about concerning the knowledge of how to deal with ourselves with stress during pregnancy? What would you say? Do we have women aware of how do they cope with stress during pregnancy?
So you find there are women who are aware and they know that this is stress. Whatever I'm experiencing, these are signs and symptoms of stress. But also there are women who may not be aware. They may attribute this to maybe the hormonal changes that they're having because of pregnancy. So I think as a country, as women, is for us to be self-aware. And especially when you know you are not coping. I think that is like the key area. Every time you have had maybe these stresses,
when do you get to know that you're not coping? Because sometimes you do not want to accept that we are stressed. So when do you get to know that, you know what, I think I'm not coping with this stress?
So when there are changes in your behavior and also changes in your emotional reactions, how are you reacting to things? So you can always note there's a difference between how I was reacting before and how I am reacting now. So you find that maybe the relationship that you have with your co-workers, with your spouse, with family members, with friends, there's also a change. And maybe they are pointing it out. They are telling you, by the way, there's something. We can notice this, there's something. And also, maybe for you it is to see, are you sleeping well? Because at particular time you were sleeping well, but now you're not sleeping well. Are you feeding well? There are changes in your feeding. Do you get easily angered? You are irritable. You find that you are not eating, you are not maybe doing the things that you used to do. You are doing them, but you are not enjoying them. So I think it's for the woman now to be aware that, especially changes, things that were okay for you, they were normal for you, because as we said, everyone goes through stresses. And a pregnant woman goes through stresses, and sometimes it can be beyond them. So it's for the woman now to be aware that there's a change from how I was reacting to things and how I am reacting now. Maybe before pregnancy, this thing that I am, the life events that I'm having now, I could cope, as in I could manage. They were there, the demands at work were there, but I could manage. But at this particular time, the demands are the same, but I am not coping. So I think the differences in your behavior and how you react to things can be an indication that you have stress.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's now get to coping as a pregnant woman.
Yes.
There are so many issues. And let's divide this pregnancy into two categories. There are those without support system. There are those with support system, but they still will not cope with the stress. Maybe we could begin with the ones without support system. We do have single parents. We do have young girls who are getting pregnant and they totally have no one around them. So how do they cope with stress at that particular point in situation?
Yeah, I think when it comes to social support, as you've always said, it's key. It helps a lot of people cope with the day-to-day challenges of life. But you find that maybe this is a single mother, this is a young girl who is pregnant, and they do not have any kind of social support. So I think talking about the challenges that you're having, I think it goes a long way. Because you find that there are avenues where this person can get support, especially when it comes to the hospitals. So you find that maybe you're not getting support at home. You're not getting support from maybe your partner, but when you go to the antenatal clinics, when you talk to the doctor, when you talk to the nurses, maybe there are hospitals that have support groups. So you find that this person may not be getting support from the family, but they are getting support from other women that are pregnant who can also help them in that journey. Yes. And
we are still staying with the people without any support system. There are still a category of people, they do not have those kind of people, they do not know where to access the support groups that you are talking about. Is there a way that the way they are pregnant girls out there in the streets, we're not forgetting the street children that we are having, how do they single-handedly deal with it? Yeah.
I think it becomes a challenge. I know it's quite a challenge because now you find that they are pregnant, some are aware or not, and there is a lot of stress when it comes to their coping. So it's a challenge. I don't know how we can go about it, but I think it's maybe for them or maybe others who are around them, just to identify that this person needs support. So even if it's not through them, but also through people who are around them, to identify this person needs a lot of support, so that they can give the support that this woman needs. Yes.
And also, Doc, just speak with parents. There is a lot of stigmatization when it comes to teenage pregnancy. Your child, your young girl gets pregnant and you're really angry with that girl. You do not want to see her. You do not. Maybe you could speak to our parents. I'm not saying I'm encouraging that, but just in case it happens, how important it is to take care of these girls, to just ensure not just for their own safety, but also for the safety of their children, the unborn children. Yeah.
So I think for the parents, it's just to encourage them to give their daughters support. I know it's hard, especially when you had a lot of expectations for your child. You wanted them to turn out the way you wanted them to turn out. But sometimes life happens and things happen in life. So sometimes it's good for us now to take it as it is at that particular time, because now you can't change whatever, you can't change anything. So it's first of all for the parents to accept that this has happened. Because sometimes you find that when this young girl is given a lot of support from the family, it helps them with the pregnancy, helps them also with the outcome of the child. So for parents, it's very important for them to give that support, because it goes a long way for this young girl. Yes.
And also for girls, you know you're pregnant, you still not met your parents' expectations, so you do not know how to approach your parents and inform them. So the only thing you have is to just keep quiet or even run away from your home. Is there a way? How do we approach our parents about this? Yeah.
It's a challenging issue, because now you find that parents are different, but this young girl is the only one who knows how their parents are. Maybe, you know, there's a way I can approach them. Maybe there's somebody I can use, maybe an aunt, an uncle, somebody that listens to the parents. So as much as sometimes it's difficult for the now young girl to go direct to their parents, they can use somebody else as an avenue to get to the parents. Yeah, but speaking about it goes a long way. I know it's hard for the young girl, but I think there's more to life. Because sometimes as a society, we stigmatize these young girls, but we forget that there's more to life. This young girl, yes, this has happened, but they will be able to give birth and even go back to school and be somebody in life. So sometimes you cannot just cut it out and say, you know, your
That's
future now, it's the end of your future. We don't know about tomorrow. So it's for us to support them at that particular time, then now get to go to the next level when that happens.
Yeah,
yes.
But I know for the people, for women who already have support system, coping with stress is a little bit easier. So how do they go about it?
For the women that have
the support
system,
yeah.
So we've said social support is one of the areas, but also for them also when it comes to management of stress, it's also maybe to do the exercises that we said, little workouts here and there. Also for them to eat balanced diets. It goes a long way. Also having a friend that maybe they can talk to, or somebody, maybe especially when it's the first time mothers, having somebody who has gone through pregnancy, for them to be able to tell you, are these things that I'm going through normal or not? So you find that you get somebody you can always talk to and to help you. Also employing what we call relaxation techniques, meditation, yoga, you know, taking a break. Anytime you feel this is too much, anytime you feel that something is too much, take a break. So that now you can be re-energized, so that you can also be able now to cope. Yes.
Let's get to the preventive measures. We've talked about how we can manage, we can cope, how we, you know, but is there a way we can prevent ourselves from getting stressed? You know, is there a way we can put a block and ensure that we are not stressed during pregnancy?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that sometimes you are aware that anything that is too much, so too much strain, too much workload, too much, anything that is too much that you feel I cannot cope with, is now for you to be able now to know at this particular time I put a break, I take a break. Then also know, because sometimes you find that we cannot predict what happens in our lives, but we can always know that this thing can lead to stress. So you are self-aware, then you become proactive. That instead of you now waiting for this to happen, then you react to it, you're able now to be proactive. That you, when you find that this thing, the way you can see that the way this thing is going, it can predispose me to stress. So you're able to do something before this happens. Yes.
And no, you said it's yes and no?
Yeah. No, because now most of the time you find that we can't predict what will happen. We can't predict how things are going, the reactions we are going to have, the life events. Because sometimes when a woman can be pregnant, things happen in their life, they lose a loved one, they lose their jobs, they get maybe a divorce, you know. All these things are things that maybe the woman cannot be able to predict. They cannot be able to control. So sometimes we cannot control the things that will happen in our lives, but we can control how we will react to them. Yeah, because most of the time we find that how we react to things also has an effect on how we are going to react as human beings. So when something happens to you and maybe you take it from the negative angle, you're like, now this is it, this is the end, this is a definition of what will happen in my future. Then you find that now your body has problems adjusting and also coping. But when something happens to you and you say, you know what, as much as this has happened, maybe better things will come. So sometimes even how we react to things also has a contributing factor on how our outcomes will be. Yes.
And as we wind up, that's your camera, just tell women out there why it's important to consider counseling during pregnancy, and also leave them with a few tips on how you can, because you said it's a yes or no for preventing, but how you can cope with it.
Maybe for the women out there, the most important thing is for them to be self-aware. That you find find that there are changes in your day-to-day, how you cope with things. Also, you find that in terms of how you react to things, you see there's a change. So being self-aware, also getting to know that you're angry, you're irritable, you are not coping well, you are not sleeping well, you are not eating well. Those are some signs and symptoms of stress. So it's good for you to seek help. Seeking help goes a long way. I'd like people to also be able to embrace counseling. It goes a long way. Sometimes people they don't like counseling because somebody says that if I go for counseling, I'm going to expose myself, you know. I'm going to talk about my issues. But as a country, I think it goes a long way when we embrace therapy, when we embrace counseling. It helps a lot. Professional counseling, professional therapy.
Okay, well said, Dr. Ruth Mwaura. Thank you so much for making time for us. Thank you for coming to my doctor show. Looking forward to hosting you once again.
Thank you.
All right, that's all the time we had for the show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your contribution. We highly appreciate. You can always download our previous episodes, including this one, from our YouTube channel, which is Ebru TV Kenya and Purity Museo. I'll see you again tomorrow. God bless.